Yeah, shout out to him. I think that's a good transition for
Let's move on.
Easy. Is that the thought of the day?
That's the thought of the day, Trav. Take it away.
Thought of the day, guys. I know we've been seeing a lot of stuff going on with, Kanye West. He's saying a lot of crazy things, and I know everyone always off his meds. Is that okay? Is that okay, man?
To
use that as an excuse?
Dismissive, man.
You know, I thought was interesting in like the interview I watched where he went from talking about how, like, we all have heard it when he's talking about how he has a mental disability.
Yeah.
And then the interview, he was saying he never had a mental disability. He was just exhausted. So I guess Ye would say if you said like he was off his meds, he'd be like, "What are you talking about? I never had a disability to even have these meds. These meds were pushed on by people that shouldn't even been around me or in my circle." But at the same time, I think it's like so contradictory for him to say like, "Yo, like I have a mental disability." He made a whole album based on the fact that he has a mental disability, and then he's coming out like and I get it, like people grow and stuff happens around them that maybe if people always tell you have a mental disability, you're gonna believe it. Fair. At the same time, though, like you can't just like disown that whole statement and album that you made about it and then go off to say like I never had it. I was just exhausted.
Yeah, so many excuses.
I think on the topic of his mental illness is like, I think that's sort of part of it is to sometimes accept it, sometimes deny it, sometimes to be defensive about it, sometimes to be open and, willing to share about it. So I think we as a society need to practice what we preach, especially with him. Like I'm not trying to dismiss what he's saying because I think his message now is pretty relevant and pretty powerful. But I think as a society, we preach sensitivity, and with certain people, we lack sensitivity. And I understand with his topic, we probably shouldn't have a microphone in his face, and it just comes with his platform, his fame, his success. But we as society say, okay, we're still pulling him on all these shows for interviews. We're still putting him in all these situations. Yeah, and I think like Trevor Noah was talking about it. It was just like, if you at one point loved this person, you don't want to see them make a fool of themselves. And I don't think he is making a fool of himself. Don't get me wrong, but I'm saying if he is having an outburst, for example, that may not be the best time to record him. You know what I mean? So on the topic of mental illness, like if we're going to be sensitive, we need to be sensitive for everybody, not pick and choose. You know what I mean? Just because he's funny to make fun of or he's a billionaire, so it doesn't matter how he feels. Like, no, he's a human being, right? And it's showing right now that the world's turning on him. One day we're with him, one day we're against him. We're bullying him, making fun of him, posting him. He's bullying people, and it's a toxic back and forth, and toxic dynamic.
At the same time, like he puts himself at the forefront of the conversation. Yeah. And that's kind of what like they were talking about in the interview too. Like it's with his tweets, it's with his like he's going like if he just never said quote unquote anything, I'm not saying that he shouldn't. I'm not saying anything he's saying was wrong or right. But if he all of a sudden he just never said anything, we would never have anything to talk about.
Yeah.
He puts himself, and I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not saying it's wrong or right because at the end of the day, we need a Kanye. We need someone that will spark conversations about serious matters.
Yeah.
So he's a very important part of our society.
Yeah.
It's just that point of understanding that he's putting himself on that platform, you know? So, like, if you're going to be saying crazy stuff on tweet, you're not crazy, but whatever, however you want to define it. But if you're going to be tweeting stuff and then you're going to go on talk shows and you're going to do all this, like, literally, like, you're putting yourself in front of an audience on purpose.
But right? I think that's kind of, that's where we're agreeing but disagreeing at the same time. We're agreeing that he is putting himself out there, but I'm disagreeing because I don't think he's in the right mind to make those decisions.
I don't know. So here's my thing. I guess it will depend on like the definition or like how people see mental illness, right? Right? Because like at the end of the day, I think like everybody has suffered a mental illness or is suffering a mental illness. It's just like comes with the territory of life, right? And it's just whether you want to define it or how far on the spectrum you are. And there's someone that's like depressed because, something sad happened in their day. There's someone that's seriously depressed because there's stuff going on. They just mentally actually may need medication to help them, right? Some people just might need someone to talk to. Some people might just need a quick release, right? So I think like the mental illness, for sure, he was going through some sort of mental illness, as most people are. It's just the way that he portrayed it and like exposed it to the world, which is his art, which is his platform. Yeah. And then to like, you can't like now dismiss that, right? Like, so I wouldn't say like take a mic away from him because he's going through a mental illness.
I'm not saying take it away.
It's nice to see
it's relative
him through
to
all of his changes, just for him to accept that like he's going through. You can't just dismiss that now Because
no, I'm not dismissing.
No,
it.
not you.
The
He
point
did.
of no
He did.
him,
Yeah,
even
he
him.
dismissed it.
What I'm trying to say about him is like his specific mental illness is like bipolar. So he becomes manic and he's depressive. So he's up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
So when he's up, it's like he's unstoppable, and he's such a big personality, such a huge mega icon that like he's almost unstoppable when he's in that manic state, right? So nothing any person around him can tell him will change his mind because he's not only a mega icon himself, but he's manic. So he's like in this heightened state where he feels like he needs to say what he says.
Yeah.
He feels what he feels to a infinite level. And so he has to get that point across.
I didn't understand.
Oh, sorry.
Wow, Siri listening. Why are you listening, Siri, bro? It's probably these guys are listening. And we're canceled. no, what I'm saying is like, I'm not saying take the mic away from him. And I don't even want this whole conversation to be focused on his mental health.
Fair, I
because I think what he's saying right now is coming from him and it's
Yeah, that's the thing.
relevant to his reality.
Exactly.
You
He
know what I
gets
mean?
on these. He doesn't have a publicist right now censoring what he's saying.
Yeah.
So whatever is in his mind is what he's saying.
Yeah.
He might not think about it right away, and that's why some of these comments coming out are seen as such bad things because he's just saying what's on his mind and he's not filtering it at all. Right.
And I think that's an important, like you're saying, we need a Kanye. We need a person that's willing to think out loud. With my friends or with you guys especially, like we do these podcasts and it's a very creative space. It's a very open and like it's rare we have a conversation we let each other finish our entire thought. You know what I mean? So this is a very like a way you can get through these thoughts and work through these speeches without being interrupted, without being influenced, without your mind being changed, right? And I think it's important to speak out loud and be willing to speak out loud, to be wrong, to then correct your previous thought and then refocus yourself in a different route. I think he's a disorganized speaker. I think
Yeah.
it shows when he speaks.
So let's talk about some of the things that he spoke about, like some of the topics, some of the subjects, because he spoke about a lot of things. So what were some of like our thoughts, or what do we think about some of the things that he was saying? Like, so yeah, let's talk about some of the things that he spoke about. And there was a lot of topics. What were some of the things that you guys heard that were interesting?
Well, I want to say, like, without kind of diving into the, the specifications of which group owns what. And, like, I think that's, like, I know, I kind of feel like I know what he was trying to get at. And I think his point's been proven, given the consequence of his words. But I think it is a very prevalent issue in the Black community and entertainers in general to not own their own product.
Yeah.
And to not get the most out of what they put into it. So these guys are next level talent, generational talents, and they're not seeing generational changing money like the Jay-Z's or the Drakes or whoever are making the near $1 billion, right? Like you'll have Chris Brown, for example. He's a generational talent. He may have, Chris Brown, $100 million, but that's not like change the world money, right?
Yeah.
Like you need the Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, those kind of guys. Like I'm not saying Chris Brown should be on that level, but I'm saying their money that they're receiving from their talent, which is 100% produced by them and their performance, is
Big
being
cuts.
filtered
It's a
through a
big
whole
cut,
bunch
yeah.
of different things, right?
That's why it's like I was listening to Charlemagne. He was talking about all of the athletes that dropped him or dropped their Donda athletes, right? And Aaron Donald was one of them. And the statement came out, and they were talking about, or the statement was like, I don't agree with his anti-Semitist like remarks, right?
Yeah.
But there was no mention. That's how you know it's not them actually writing it.
Yeah.
They have publicists and everyone. Most of the people, they only talk about the Jewish community, and there has been no talk about the African American community.
Yeah.
There's been no like issues about that. And they also showed, I can't remember which company it was. It was either Adidas or Balenciaga. I think it was Adidas. But like they showed, when Kanye had the whole line about slavery being a choice. There was the article out there that was like, we stand by Kanye with his remarks regarding the the slave remarks. But then when it came out with the Jewish remarks,
Immediately
dropped right away, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think Charlemagne was saying, you don't just, it's just not the Jewish remarks. It's got to be the African American
gotta be all
remarks,
racist
all of them,
remarks.
but it's
Yeah.
just only the Jewish
It's not.
remarks that are.
And like he wore the White Lives Matter shirt. He talked about George Floyd and their family, and apparently they're suing. But he was not canceled for those things.
Yes.
And that's hate speech borderline.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The same way he had hate speech towards the Jewish community, both are equivalently
They're both wrong.
wrong. But one is seeing consequences, and it shows exactly the point he's trying to make.
Right.
Who's
Yeah.
really has the power.
Yeah.
Right?
And whether he's trying to make these points intentionally or not, when he at the moment of the tweets, like it could be like he was saying in the end of one of the interviews, like, you know, like he's wording them wrong, because not wrong, but like in the moment he's being a little, maybe he could be a little more choosy with his words.
For sure.
So he didn't want to selectively say it like that with some of the things that he's saying. However, like the point is coming across to provoke thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of us are gonna go back and like think about the George Floyd situation and like the way that Kanye sees it, is like, you're kind of, you have a very valid point where it's like, but like, and I'm not here to dispute how he died, because we don't know, right? We know, but we don't know, and that's kind of what Kanye was saying. I never even thought about it like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you know, like he's like, look, JFK, you know, they looked at it a whole bunch of different ways, but they only put one scenario. And I think the biggest thing that he was pushing was they made one rhetoric, which we all see and we all believe. And that's kind of like the point. They made one rhetoric, told everybody the rhetoric, and that was it. And we had to believe it. And now we all started standing, rallying, fighting for it. And it's like that was the only rhetoric ever. And it's like, who controls media? Who controls like these public platforms? Who controls who gets to see what, right? So like that was like the tricky part about it, where it's like if we're always getting pushed one rhetoric, it's like we're still getting controlled and manipulated to a certain way. And that was at a time where there was nothing else going on social media.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there was such a big disturbance from it because we all had to believe this one thing.
Bro,
right?
he said something in an interview that I was just watching, and like I thought it was just rambling, pretty dumb. But then he said something like he was talking about how like the world needs to have, we should only study engineering, and things like history should never be studied. And the mediator was like, no, well, we need to learn from history. Like, you learn from history so you don't repeat history. And he's like, who wrote history? The victors.
Yeah.
I have things in my life where something happens in the morning and someone tells it back to me later on in the evening, and it's not what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, how do you know what is right? Like, when we were growing up, how did they talk about Native Americans in our schools? They didn't talk to them, they were killing them and murdering them and making them. So it's like, bro, he said that shit, and I was like, you know,
And even
what?
on that topic of
It's true.
Native
It's so
Americans,
true. That's
like
a good
Day
one.
of Reconciliation is supposed to be dedicated to them, but it gives every person that enslaved them and tortured them and murdered them, raped them, a holiday.
It's
gives
that's true.
So
Crazy.
it's like I move into your house, I kick you out,
Yo.
and then I'm like, okay, you know, this day's dedicated to you. I'm gonna stay home and chill and watch a movie. That's so next level fucked up. It's not even funny.
And that's
right?
what Kanye's saying, and he's saying like it's happening with the African American culture too. And like he made a really good point. He was talking about like the killings in Chicago, right? And like I said, like the way he says things are overly aggressive. However, it does spark a conversation, which is the most important part of it, right? And it's like he was talking about like how like all these kids that died because like the mass killings, and then the conspiracy behind it. Not saying the conspiracy behind it is true, but he made a good point. He's like 14 kids die, and I don't know if the stats true or not, but it's like 14 kids die a week in like the area of Chicago, right? And it's not talked about, and it's true. It's like there's certain. And his point, I think what the point was trying to be made there, or the point that kind of sparked in my mind from him saying that, is like there's certain things that are going to get publicized in the media that are like happening, and they want us to look at. And then there's certain things that happen on a daily basis that are getting ignored in certain communities that don't get the recognition and the awareness that they deserve for the major issues that are going on a day to day, because people are okay with them happening. In a sense, the higher ups are okay with these issues happening.
He was also talking about like how, you know, if you take a child and you teach the African American child, you teach them they came from Africa as a slave, they're going to have that mentality instead of teaching them that of the kings of Africa who were worth, if you take their net worth from then versus today, it'd be like $400 billion. Like instead of teaching them about like the conquerors of them, they're teaching them about, you know, the slave mentality, which is I don't know,
and we're like a spin-off. Like we're in Canada, and we kind of see that in our history books too. Like we don't really learn much about like African American or Black history, other than like 1 month in February we have to do a report on one person. Other than that, like we had the same books, we studied the same people, Christopher Columbus, XYZ, talking about how like they're the greats, and these are like European greats, which is I guess interesting, but it doesn't mean it's the only thing. And there should be more of awareness of. There's so much diversity now in America, in Canada, in all these places that like all these cultures should be looked at However, like and he says that there's an agenda being pushed, which we can't really deny, because if we go back to our schooling and our education, we don't learn a lot of things that would put power to other cultures.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think the objective topics are a lot more relevant in school. Like
Yeah.
like I didn't realize how subjective history was and those kind of things, and like even like language, those kind of things, because you can talk about Christopher Columbus and you call him a pioneer. A pioneer is a first and a builder and like a innovative person.
Yeah.
A pioneer is a positive term. You're a pioneer in the computer industry.
Yeah.
You're you know what I mean?
Yeah,
You're building, you're creating.
This guy
Pioneer is
found
a
his place
positive,
by
but you're
accident.
a colonizer. That's
Yeah.
a very different thing. A colonizer imposes their culture on somebody.
Yeah, literally.
A pioneer is building from the ground up.
It's so ignorant.
implying that nothing's there.
This
So
guy-
when
this
you
guy-
have things like English, that's a subjective topic. Things like history are subjective topics, and you don't really think about that until you have a guy brave enough to go out and say it.
Yeah.
So I kind of commend him for that. You know?
Louis C.K. had this bit where Christopher Columbus came to Americas and he was looking for India, right? And he came to Canada, Native Americans. You're not Indians? No, we're Native Americans. You're Indians for thousands of years.
We're gonna call you
You're
that.
Indians. Like, so
And
ignorant.
it's so
bro.
ignorant, right? And like you kind of like you said, you teach someone to come in as a slave. They cannot deviate from that mindset.
Yeah.
You teach someone that they're born into oppression. They cannot overcome the
Right.
oppression, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying these inequalities don't exist, right? But you are not a slave. You are not limited to your history.
Literally.
Your history, yeah, it impacts your life right now, but you are in the present and you're moving forward. You like to be stagnant on the past and to live in a reality that you didn't actually experience. It's just detrimental to the future. It slows progress.
It's true, and like we have to agree with him when he talks about history. It's like all we're doing is like reconditioning every individual of what they were and where they came from. So you shouldn't be shit in a sense, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, yo, you came from this. This is what you went through. This is what you were. This is where you are. You're just a slave, right? Like, and like they're not seeing it, but it's said throughout like us learning history. Well, you know, XYZ came here, and then you know they brought the slaves from XYZ, and then they worked on the plantation. It's like, wow, like, so someone from like the age of, I don't know, 3 when you access school to by the time you're 12, you understand that depending on your culture or depending on your skin color, you already know where you were in history and where you should fit in.
Yeah.
So it's like, and Kanye's talked about this before in the past, like how slavery is a mindset, you know? So it's like, as soon as like an African American or whatever it is learns that like, oh, you were a slave, then it's just going to push the rhetoric of always thinking like, I was always a slave. You know, my
Victim
parents were
mentality.
exactly. And that's probably like one of the worst mentalities to try and to succeed from.
Yeah.
Because it's like the whole world's against, and like, yes, is the whole world against you to a certain degree? Yes, depending where you are in the world, because there's certain laws that are actually against you, right? But if you're not born, imagine like the history was more objective. It was taught like, yo, you're actually a king. You came from here, da da da. And all of a sudden, it's not like, oh, I've been a slave my whole life. My parents were a slave. It's like, yo, I've been a king my whole life. My parents were kings. How much differently would someone operate on a day-to-day basis
sure.
if they felt like a king versus
sure.
feeling like a slave?
And it
right?
almost makes you feel like you deserve less.
yeah,
Because you are
Like,
not
that's good enough for me.
Yeah, that's good enough. Like, wow, I made $1
like
million.
minor wins
I'm
will be a
majorly
big
successful,
win.
right?
Whereas if you're told a
Yeah.
king, it's like, yo, I want the whole pot back.
Yeah.
I had it before, I want it back. If you're told a slave, it's like, yo, I was given this parcel, I want my parcel that was owed to me from my generations
Yeah.
living. If you're told you're a king, you're like, yo, I had this palace, I want that palace.
And I really like his energy now. And that's kind of, first of all, Pick can't tell me nothing. Wait till I get my money right.
Yeah.
He has his
I had
money.
a dream
You-
I could buy.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Don't try to slide
One
yourself
album
into
that's
the
spent
votes.
it on
I'm
a
saying,
necklace.
take a look at the take a look at the list and remember, like, at times.
Yeah, thin wire,
it's
thin wire.
contextual.
Yeah,
But,
all
but what
falls
the
down,
point
all
I'm trying to
falls
make
down.
is like the man has more money than he'll ever need.
Yeah.
Even if he loses his billionaire status, even if he's left with $30 million, that's more money than you'll ever need in your life. Sell all your houses, sell your
Yeah.
crib in Wyoming or wherever it is. He has more money than you. He does not care anymore about being sold.
Exactly.
He has 1 million Grammys, has 1 million success. Now it's about social change. It's about being that pioneer, like that. Remember, you were saying, I'm a god, I'm Steve Jobs, I'm all these influential people. And it sounded like the most ridiculous statement. But if you make these changes in society and you actually push a certain ideology and you're willing to sacrifice yourself for the greater good, you are a Steve Jobs. You are a Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah.
And
It's not
those
about
type
your
of-
bank account. It's about your impact.
Now
It's about
we,
your impact.
we do have to go back into like one of the interviews and like the way he was speaking, because like we all agree that what Kanye has done has caused change. Now the way he was speaking was a very high ego individual, and it was I would say it wasn't the best way to operate
sure.
when having a conversation with an individual. Like you can't just
Can I
start saying,
I chime in on that?
oh, like let me just say my 2 cents.
Yes.
Then you can't just start saying la la la, like you know, like when someone they're talking to another grown man, you can't just start calling him boy.
No, but
like
he
when
no,
you're
but
talking
that,
to another
okay. That's
grown
what I
man.
was gonna say. Pierce Morgan is notorious for
Big
trying
time.
to lowboy
Well,
guys.
that's what he's doing though.
They're the same.
He's trying to
age.
get clicks, right?
He's trying to get clicks. He's saying you need to apologize. No, fuck you. I don't
Yeah.
need to apologize.
I
you know
agree.
what I mean?
And at the end of the conversation, he apologized.
But no, but
so where does that leave us?
No, but this is what I'm saying. Pierce Morgan is not being criticized for bullying.
He calls
Kanye.
him Chris.
Kanye's
He calls
being
him-
criticized for being disrespectful back.
Yo,
He's interrupting. Imagine every time you try to get a point across, I was like, no. Apologize.
Here's Morgan
I agree.
calling women fat and shit
yeah.
I'm not,
air.
and I'm not here to like disagree with any of what you guys are saying. Like I'm not saying that Pierce Morgan is the best human being in the world at all. No, but what I'm saying is like the way that like if I'm in a conversation and someone is disrespecting me, let's just say, how does it show? Or
No,
how
for
is
sure.
it if I'm like that? Like I don't have to change my mannerisms just because of how you're talking to me.
Yeah.
You know, if one of you guys are disrespectful to me, that doesn't mean I have to all of a sudden be, well, you know, F you
But
too,
I think
da, da, da.
I think
can
that's
still
a
be
perfect
like, you know what?
representation
You
of
know?
what he's saying. Is that Pierce Morgan is not facing the same scrutiny as Kanye West, even though they both were very egocentric. They were both very self-centered. They were both blunt in trying to get their point across aggressively.
I
They're
agree.
they both approached that debate in the same way, and Kanye is being looked at
Not,
very
but they
differently than
didn't. They didn't approach it like was okay. So Pierce Morgan was, like what's the right word? He was like properly attacking Kanye. You
But
know what I mean?
properly
It was
based
like
on what
passive. So that's
standard?
what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
passive.
Passive aggressively attacking Kanye.
Yeah.
So he wasn't like blatant with it, but he was passive aggressively
Definitely
interruptingly
instigating.
and for sure, 100%. Kanye was returning that energy with like a lot of disrespect.
Matching
so
it, though.
he was matching it 100% on the same level, except the way he was going about it, I wouldn't agree with.
No, I do agree
like
with
you
it.
can't.
Though.
Like,
I think it's necessary.
So if you
at
start
some
going
point.
la, when I say la la la, that means you stop talking. That's fair. That's fair. But like you don't have to say it like that.
but you do.
You don't.
You do. Okay,
You don't.
okay, I want to emphasize the fact that Kanye is a disorganized speaker and he thinks as he speaks.
Yes.
Which in communicative sense is not good. You need to have a collective thought and then translate that thought. That's what effective communication is. He thinks as he speaks. So
Yeah.
he is a very rough speaker. And I
Yeah.
think if coached, he could be a very, very effective, like presidential type speaker. But Pierce Morgan does all the same tactics Kanye West does. He's a very aggressive and frustrating person to watch speak because he interrupts. He's not
Yes,
getting his
big
complete
time.
point, and he's not allowing the other person. He's not there to listen.
Shout out to the Andrew Tate interview.
That one was rough to
You know,
watch,
it
man.
was.
And then
He was interrupting
says,
him.
Does everyone want to be like you? Does everyone want to be a successful blah blah blah?
That was a good line.
And that's a good line, but he's looking for the punchline.
Exactly.
He's looking for the punchline.
That's his job, right?
It's his job. I understand that, but you're a toxic interviewer.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I
For
mean?
sure.
So you're gonna get a toxic response,
sure.
and I think it's necessary. Like if you're being a dick to me all day, there's a point in time where I'm like, you're not getting the message if I'm being polite. People go on that show and get bodied. There's a point in time where I'm like, you know what? La la la, you shut up. I'm Kanye West
So-
and you're Pierce Morgan.
So
There's a
we're-
difference.
So
you know?
it's okay the way that he handled that. is
No,
what you're saying.
no,
and
no.
that's kind of my
what
point. I'm not saying
I agree with
like,
you. I agree.
Yeah,
he can
yeah.
be a better overall communicator in every single interview, but specifically with the Pierce Morgan incident, there's a point in time where a man's not letting you get your point across, and he's little boying you,
Yeah.
without saying the word boy. Kanye said the word boy. Pierce Morgan's like, Kanye, you're a crazy waste man.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
a crazy waste man. We're not hearing you. You're not getting your point across. Just say sorry. And Kanye's like, no, don't. I'm not a boy. Don't treat me like a boy. You know what I mean? He's a grown ass man with 4 kids worth
A
X
billion.
amount of money.
That's
Yeah, like,
fair. That's
you know
fair.
what I
So
mean?
like, yo, instead of saying like boy, he could say, listen,
could.
I'm a grown ass man. Don't treat me like a boy. If not, then I'm.
But how many people have said that to Pierce Morgan and have not gotten through? You remember Kanye saying boy, because
Yeah.
that street speaks to our community. Kanye's not speaking to the dorky guy that's watching it.
That's fair.
Dorky.
That's,
It's a dork.
fair.
I was trying to find an
fair.
appropriate word before man's are like, oh, canceled. But no, like
fair.
Kanye is not speaking to that community. He's speaking to our community. Like, yo, don't let this corny ass dude son you on TV when he's nowhere in your level.
That's fair.
You know what I mean? So sometimes you have to say the word boy. Sometimes you have to son a guy in a certain way that people that are watching are gonna remember and feel that.
I guess that's where we disagree because I'm saying like, yo, you can get your point across and without saying those kind of things.
I think there have been
I
many
think
people that
so.
have tried to get the same point Kanye's trying to get off
that's
in
fair.
a very
Bodied.
diplomatic and political way, and a very calculated way, and it's been unsuccessful.
That's fair.
Sometimes the roughness and the unconventional methods are exactly how you need to get the point across.
That's exactly how Kanye gets the point
Yeah,
across.
and
I think
don't get me
it's
wrong,
not-
it's gonna
that's
get the
not
most clicks
necessarily
at the
how
end of the
It's
day.
gonna get the
Yeah.
most clicks because all life is about, especially in our time, is influence.
Yeah.
He has influence. You call a man boy that's 60, that's this.
Yeah.
that-
He's not-
versus
he's not-
saying,
he's not
Pierce, I would
doing-
really like you to listen to my entire
Yeah,
argument.
but like
You're
here's
saying,
the
"Yo,
thing,
shut up, boy, I'm the guy.
and, like here's the thing, like Kanye is not saying it to get clicks. He's literally saying it because that's just naturally how he speaks.
But he knows the clicks
And that,
are a direct correlation to his
that's more the
influence.
issue. It's like, he's not saying this because it's like, I want everybody to watch from the, and like I think that's one point that we took away from the interview. It's like, he's not, a lot of the things he's not even doing because he wants everybody to see it. He's doing it because he wakes up and that's literally what's
Yeah.
on his mind, or he like this literally whatever is on his mind. He just
It's
he
genuine,
just lets
man.
it flow. It just comes. You know what I mean?
And I think if we
So
as a
it's-
society adopted that to an extent, I
To
want
an
to emphasize
extent.
to an extent, allowing free speech, free flowing, free thought, we would be able to address certain issues
Big
that now
time.
we tiptoe
we
around.
would.
Big time.
I
You know what I
agree
mean?
with
Instead
that.
of
I
canceling
agree with
every
that.
single
I agree
person
with
that
that.
says
Imagine
anything.
we sit in a room, right?
Yeah.
And I have an incomplete thought, and
Yeah.
I want to run it by you guys. Yeah, I feel this way about this and this and this, and you guys are like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Instead of
turtle up,
attacking
and
you.
I'm never
Yeah.
going to actually
Exactly.
express
That's fair.
that thought and develop that thought."
That's fair. That's
so
fair.
if Kanye is now saying, "I will sacrifice everything to be able to speak my mind," that's something. And then he'll actually in the end of an argument, like you said, apologize, be like, "I was tripping. I shouldn't have said it that way." That shows it's an incomplete thought, and he's willing to grow and progress. And process
I
these things.
wish, like in a dream world, see how Pierce interviewed the Pierce Morgan interviewed. Like there was a break and then they came back to it. In dream world, I would love to see how that conversation went off air.
Off
Yeah.
topic.
Oh my god! Because like literally, they stopped and they came back, and both their demeanors were completely
Different.
different. Completely different.
Yeah.
And I would love to see how that gap happened.